yard site of Nadav and Avihu.
That's right.
Srs Nefesh.
So, Rabbi asked I should speak about kashering Pesach. You know, I'm going to say what I say always to the Balabata my shul, especially for the ladies. Baruch Hashem, Pesach, we have enormous amount of chumras, but unfortunately, it became unbearable. So for that, when things become unbearable, you find ways out. You know, people, it's a rich neighborhood that I am, and many people go to hotels, which, as I always explain to them, if I don't see the problem, it doesn't exist. Going to a hotel, there's a lot more problems than doing it at home. But the truth is because the chumras come, because some things is up Halacha, some things you don't have to do. I had a couple who came who never has a child that well, and I went over with them, what has to be done up Halacha? So I want to start just the first thing is, you do not have to move your freezer, your refrigerator, and the oven. You don't have to move it to get rid of the chametz underneath it. There's no such halacha. A woman do it. I'm not saying it's not extra credit, but there's no obligation whatsoever. The Gemara says clearly, whatever chametz is there becomes batel. So there is really no obligation whatsoever to move freezer, refrigerator, anything that, any of these things that women, they do, and that's number one. And now let's talk about kashering, which is really, really important. I want to explain something, a famous machlokes between the Mishnah Berurah and the Shulchan Aruch. And on that basis, there's difference. I spoke once to Rabbi Reichik in the Chabad, after last year, in the Chabad community, among the rabbis also. But let me explain. So let me explain what this is all about. There's a din that to kasher something, the Gemara says a rule, kaboloi kach poltoi, which means the way it absorbs, the same way it spits out. For instance, a pot, you kasher by dipping it into hot water, because it absorbs through the cooking, it will come out through cooking. But if you have a spit, a roast spit, but you roast a piece of chametz on it, you have to have a libun. Libun means you gotta make it hot. Libun means it turns white, it starts sparkling. It's gotta be really kashered well. That's called libun. So so something that is, the criteria is you take a piece of meat and put it onto the broiler, onto the plate over there. That plate, the kasher, you literally have to make libun. Not cooking. Libun means you got to make it hot. That's, everyone agrees. That's halacha. The machlokes is, what about the grade? The grades, really, you don't cook on the grades. You don't cook. Not grades in the oven, grades on top of where the pot lies. You don't, in the stove top. You're not cooking on the grades. You don't cook on the thing. You put a pot there. So that is a big question what to do. The Mishnah Berurah paskins from many achronim that before we go further, there's another rule about kashering something. That means you could kasher a pot by dipping the pot into another pot. How do you kasher? You so probably had the kasher for Pesach, have a huge pot, and people come and dip the pot and they kasher the pot. There's another way to kasher a pot, which is called libun kal. You put it into the oven, you make it so hot that if you put a piece of newspaper on it, it would ignite. That's called libun kal. And it has the same power as halgola and seems like even better. So in the Mashal, the Shulchan Aruch says, if you cannot take a big frying pan, you have a hard time taking the frying pan and putting finding a big pot to kasher it, just make a libun kal. Make it very, very, very hot, till if you put a newspaper on it would ignite, it's just as good as a gola. That's all. So again, libun kal is the power of making a gola. So now, coming back, the grades that you put let's say the baking, or the grades, the pots that you put on top, you don't put food there. You put a pot there, you put the baking pans into the grades. The question is, during the year, things spill. How do you judge that thing when the things spill? Now, in Shulchan Aruch, it seems that just because it spilled, in the Rav alone says it, just because it spilled, it's not so terrible, you make an agala. It says Mufurish in many cases in Agola's Kalim. That means even though it's spilled on it, all you have to Agola. They claim that the Marshab learned Pshat, that's what Rabbi showed me, he learned Pshat in a more differently, and the way, it's not clear, but that's how the Rabbanan Chabad said that you need Libin Gomer. That means the grades is not enough to make Libin Kal. Since during the year we worried food spills falls onto the grade. So since food spills over, it's like the food would have gone straight into the grades. For that reason, you need to make a real libun. That means you gotta heat it up till sparks come. So, okay, granted. So the grades, you need to make it very hot. So too, the grades when you bake the baking part of the oven, you put in the thing to bake. So there too, you gotta worry that during the year, maybe the challah spilled out, some bread spilled out. So on the grades itself, you gotta make a libun. Now, let me explain. So I could hear that very good. You want to be machmer, you make a real libun. It's very hard to make a real libun. It's very, very, very difficult. I'll get to it. I'll get to that. It's a little difficult to make libun. For that reason, many people get new grades. Now, how about the inside of the oven? Now, I have to explain a yesod about kashering things. See, the inside of an oven, the walls of the oven, I don't see, on the grades itself, why do I have to kasher? I'm afraid maybe you're going to put the baking pan in, and there's some bliya there, and there's a huge chumrah in Shulchan Aruch. Let me tell you a yesod. We paskin in Yoredeya that a bliya cannot move from one place to another place without fluid. I have a piece of metal that absorbed chazer. Real chazer, this piece of metal. Then this pot is laying on this metal. Let's say you take a piece of metal, the chazer was baked on it. You put a pot on this piece of metal. So we don't say it travels from this piece of metal unless it gets wet. Dryness doesn't travel. So your Pesach may be worried, maybe the thing was a little wet, you put it in, so maybe from here, this metal went to this metal, chumetz is b'masha, maybe travels through. That I could hear. You want to be machmer, get yourself new grades. But the inside of the oven, after you make, let's say the food spills inside the oven, you never put a tray in the inside of the oven. All you got to do the inside, right? All you got to do inside the oven, make sure there's no mamoshes. I said mamoshes, substantial anything there. You got to make sure there's nothing there. And then you're worried about maybe the zeya. You know what zeya means? We spoke about the wetness rises. First of all, our ovens has no zeya. That's a fact. But let's say you are worried. So you have worried that it rises, it comes down. So you could cash it out very simply with a libin cow. Because you're not worried food is on the walls. You're only worried the zeya that's going to come down. The food that it's splashed on the bottom, no, it's never going to come up, that food. That food is, there's nothing there to come up. We're only worried about that maybe the pot is going to be here, the zay is going to come up, and then it's going to come down again. You know what zay means? The steam goes up, and it's going to dribble down again. It's going to make the top wet to come down again. And all you need is to make the oven a libin kal. For that reason, even if you want to be machmer, and you want to change the grades, you want to change the grades there, you want to change the top, but inside the oven, you don't have to use a torch. I want to tell you something. If you do need to use a torch, you cannot kasher an oven. Because you're afraid you're going to break it. And the rule in kashering is, Whenever you're afraid that it's going to break, we assume you're not going to do a good job. You're going to hold back. So Chabad people told me that, one guy tells me, the shliach in Jets tells me, my father, every 2-3 years you have to buy a new oven because he kashers as well, and the whole system, the whole breaks down. So if that's true, then you can't even kasher, period. But the truth of the matter, you really don't need to go to the other extreme. If you want to really be machmer, all you have to do is change the grades and change the top grades. But the walls, once you make it a very high, and if you it gets kasher, the living kal kashers the top and the walls.
Just making it the hottest heat.
The hottest, make it hottest for 4 hours, you kasher the thing.
What about the glass?
Well, the same thing with the glass. Glass, you don't put food onto the glass that it's going to come back. No one puts food. It's maybe splashed. So you clean it off, and that the zeik, the living kal does its job. It's a foolish in Shiurim. It helps for that. The only question is what you said. Well, how about when you put the self-cleaning oven? You put it in a cycle. That is mamish. It gets 900 degrees hot. And we have an oven like that, and the mamish comes out so clean, it looks like brand new the inside. So then it's okay. But I know that many chassidim are, not just Chabad.
Some people will put the grates from the top inside.
Yeah, and put it out, yeah. That's true, you could do that too. But I'm explaining halacha, that's all you got to do.
You're saying that the chassidim don't buy that?
They buy a new oven, they don't buy that, what I just said. They buy an insert, and my wife grew up this way. When I got married to her, I said, my dear wife, in my house, that's not going to happen.
But where do they get the ideas? They just make up.
I don't know. There's chumras upon chumras built.
What about the people that wrap the grates in foil?
You don't have to do that. At all not.
So if you clean your grates, emotional thing. It's an emotional. Yeah, you can just go crazy. When Tauber's living in a halacha class, like you said last
But is that comparable to like the people that kasher their countertops and then still cover it?
Right.
Is that the same idea?
Some people do that. Even the kasher, the countertops, they still cover it. I've heard that. I have no idea why, but I've heard that.
My mother does it.
That's why we do it, because our mothers do it.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
The answer.
Our mothers didn't have granite back in the day. Whatever.
It doesn't matter. You can't change the pot.
So anyway, so the oven, let me just explain again. The oven, as like I just explained till now, the oven is that's the best way to kasher. I'm not telling you what to do. You have to do what you have to do. I'm just explaining halacha. Yeah, and, I asked the guy, a Chabad guy tells me that his parents go to Orlando, rent a house, and I says they have a new oven. We don't know, the mashgiach takes care of it. I didn't know there's a new thing. They don't go to a hotel, but in Orlando there's a place where they rent houses. And so I think they don't put in a new oven. Are you kidding? I asked someone, my shul goes there too, goes to Orlando. Says they don't put in a new oven. The guy kashers it regular.
Why he kasher?
That's what I said. I says, who's in charge of this guy? Who will make sure that he knows what he's doing?
What is considered a clean oven to the point that there's no mamushes? Like I was talking to somebody, he said, I have an old oven. You can't really get rid
That's
of
not
the
true. That is not true. You easy off. It's very powerful easy off. It literally, the easy off takes out all the dirt.
So when you see an oven as discolored and stuff like that.
Discolor means nothing.
That doesn't mean
means
anything.
You put easy off on it, it really gets rid of all the dirt, and then you just put on the oven on very hot, and it will do its job. You'll see so again, all you need to do is an oven. I don't change the grades. I have a self-clean oven, put it on, I don't change the grades, and on the top also I just put it into the oven. But if you want to change, I could hear that chumra, I can understand, changing the grades and changing the trays, but you do not have to change the oven. If you have a self-cleaning oven, you don't have to change anything inside.
We don't have a self-cleaning oven, but it gets very hot. So would you recommend easy off the grates and then
Easy off everything, and
on the grates too?
yeah, that's what my wife does. You guys easy off, and then
An hour hottest?
later for 4 hours you yaitze every chomer in the book.
With
No, you take all the easy off. No, you're not supposed to put on the heat with the easy off. You got to clean off the.
Same, if we put on 4 hours hottest at 500 degrees, but not
Yeah,
self-cleaning,
but it's okay. Well, easy off just gets rid of the dirt, the mamo. I say mamoshes,
You don't have to
The easier burns away, mamish slips away. See, let's say, even if you don't, let me just say something. The bottom, some people have the broiler in the bottom, some people on top. The broiler, if you want to use the tray of the broiler, you really need libun, because you put the meat on it. But if you, since you're not going to do it, you get a new tray. It's very hard to make libun, and it's very, very difficult. It has to be really red hot. But if you don't know, but just clean it well. You just make sure clean, there's nothing there. That's not a problem.
If you can't do the liquid on the bottom, let's say you have the bottom broiler, but you don't intend on using it, does that affect?
No problem, not if it, just make sure it's clean. That's all I'm saying. Make sure it's clean, and then that's okay. And I want to add something before I forget. You're allowed to barbecue yontif. I don't know where this mistake comes. I'm sure it must have been printed, because every year, 2 years, people come and say to me that they read someplace that you're not allowed to barbecue. I don't know. Shiurim says you're allowed to barbecue.
It comes from the charcoal.
I'm not talking about
For a
Pesach.
few years, the charcoal had some sort of
So,
like.
right, but so you find out the kosher shop, but they held that it's not them. But it's not that. They tell me you're not allowed to, Mendel Goldman, the what's his name, the caterer, a few years ago came to me and he asked me that, I wanted to make a barbecue, and they told me you can. I took out a Shulchan Aruch. I said, we show whoever taught you. It says in Shulchan Aruch, you're allowed to barbecue yontif. It was Simchas Torah, you want to barbecue. And yeah, so it's 100% okay. It's no problem. You're allowed to barbecue. Period. You're allowed to barbecue yontif. I'm going to citing stuff. I don't know where this comes from. That people say. Coming back, that someone asked something. You want?
Can you just use a cover foil?
We don't have to cover. If you
He wants to use it, he said.
Broiler tray.
the broiler tray, well, if you cover it well, then it's not a problem.
You have to cover it just one time.
Just one time. So the whole thing is a huge chumrah, like I explained. So it's like chumrah gaba chumrah. Now, yeah.
What's the story with the coal? Somebody told me you gotta put coal in there and burn it. I did it once too long.
If you need coals, then you can't kasher, because you're afraid what you're going to do. I watched when I was a young teenager. I had my brother-in-law got married, and someone told him that I was very young. I was 14 years old. He was getting married. He was married to my sister. And I remember the Rav told him, you got to take coals, put it into the oven. And I watched him. He was so nervous. He put it in the burning, and in the next minute, water went on him. So I told him, how do you know you accomplish anything? The roof had gesucht sigit, So when I learned later, got older, and I learned the halachas, I understood why it's not good. Because whenever you're afraid of doing something, you cannot kasher. That says you're certain in halacha. If you need coals, forget it. If you need a blowtorch, forget it. Because it does break. Shulchan Aruch says clear. It's based on the Gemara. Whenever you kasher something, there's a fear in it that it breaks. Kashering does not work.
What about like a barbecue grill that's used the whole year?
That you have to get a new one, because you really have to make a libun. And it's very hard if you have in your backyard, in your backyard the well-built, built-in barbecue. You notice that you have to make a libun. The metal goes into the bricks. You have one like that? Anyone has like one?
Under and on top, people put, they make as a sandwich.
So it's very hard to kasher that. I tell people to get just the portable one for yontif and shine.
Okay, but I'm saying the actual grate, even if you replace the grate, the inside of the barbecue, there's no way to really clean that out.
The drip pan?
Yeah.
All you got to do, the drip pan, that's very simple. Fill it up with coals and burn it. Kebalakach boltai.
Fill up your whole barbecue.
But they'll let it burn. That's not a problem. The drip pan you're talking about.
Gas.
In general, even on a gas grill, there's some sort of you put in some sort of
Coals.
coals that are in there the whole time. That makes it, let's say, the fire spread out or whatever. Right? So definitely,
It drips.
from stuff during the year, it drips on that.
All you gotta
It's burnt, but it's there.
You have to clean it and you could put coals there. That's why I tell people, if you want to on Pesach, you want to get yourself a grill, get yourself these disposable grills. No problem.
Just put it on a barbecue like that, was already said, that the piece where dripping.
Drip pan.
Is the flame, just put it on high flame good enough?
It's not good enough, because the flame is on top, the gas, and the drip pan is in the bottom. You have to.
Now, you could take that piece off and put it on top, and then put it on high, would that work?
Does it get very hot? It has to get very, very, very hot. I'm not sure it'll get so hot.
So would you not blow towards the faucet or the sink? Like,
If you have to blow towards the sink, it's not going to work because you're afraid it's going to melt.
the truth is, I wonder when the washer since rip all the time.
And you ruined it.
So how do you capture the whole sink?
The sink itself, the thing, I put a pot. You could first, if you are handy, you could just unscrew it and dip it into hot water. If you're a little handy, you don't have to be a big handyman. Not so complicated. But if you're not so handy, all you do is pick up a pot of boiling water and push the whole top into it. That's good enough to kasher. The faucet.
What about the handles?
The handles, you pour boiling water and you cover it. That's the best way. It's very hard to kasher those handles. So we pour boiling water over it, and you're worried about maybe chametz. So you just cover it. Api halacha, all you need to do really is pour hot water. Because all during the year, only things that got into the kabbalah was pouring hot water. That's the only thing that got there. The only problem I have in the kitchen is the spray thing. The spray thing, how's it called? Yes. That spritzer, very often it's rubber, the tip. That rubber you cannot kasha. It's like licheres. Paiskim say you cannot kasha. I don't know what
You can cover it with tinfoil, like 2-3 holes.
No, but you can't kasha. It comes out. If you look, not on ours.
The rubber that's on the face.
On the face of it. If you notice, it's rubber. And rubber, we paskin cannot kasha, so it doesn't help covering because the water comes through the rubber and it gets, will touch it there. That we don't use a Pesach for that reason. I just don't use a Pesach.
What if someone has like a filtered water?
Filtered water is not a problem. It's filtering.
It has rubber, I'm saying.
Where does the
Sometimes it's like a rubber cap.
Yeah, but it's cold. The cold filter, the hot filter.
So what even if they're usually sometimes they're next to each other, you have like a hot and it's cold hot.
Yeah, so the hot tip is what, plastic or metal?
It's not plastic, but
It's metal.
Very strong rubber kind of. Not metal, let's put it that way. I don't know.
It is metal. It's the cover on top that's rubber.
Okay.
So either you just change that rubber,
Can
or
that run for a minute?
you could run. You have to make it run. The question is the rubber on top. We have one doesn't have a rubber. Period. Anyone has a hot thing like it is talking about? You don't know. Comes from the sink. A hot thing.
But the hot water is so hot.
It's very hot. No, it depends. You could
No,
adjust
like in
it.
my office, we have a water, like cooler machine, that you can push one button cold water, one button hot water comes out.
Yeah, but the hot water comes out. There's no rubber there, right? By you. No.
It's hot, comes
It's
out.
not all metal.
It is. But
Put it this way, no one's throwing hot water on it.
yeah, well, you're worried about maybe during the year chametz splashed on it. That's what machmer. That's a chumrah. It's a huge chumrah. We are worried during the year. The truth is that you have very little to worry. But if you at home, I could imagine you put the soup. If you have teenagers, you want to make an instant soup. You pour it in, and that could splash, and that could be a problem. So if it's rubber, you should cover that rubber. Cover that rubber. We don't have a rubber. We have it just for metal. Yes. Really, the plastic urn, the pump out, you really have to just clean it out well. You could take off the top and dip it in boiling water, clean it out well, and let it run, and it's perfectly kosher for Pesach. I must tell you, my wife doesn't agree with me. She's frummer than I am, and she made me buy it last year. I can't have the one that's a year out. She can't. It's an emotional thing. Just doesn't work.
Why can't you just stick that into a hot boiling water?
You can't stick it. You can't.
No, just the tip, I'm saying.
Well, I take off the whole tip. But most of it comes off.
You have to know how to take it off and put it on.
No, it's not
Just
so.
dip it into a pot of water.
The whole top. You mean the top? You can put it in hot water. Yes. Okay. Just let's talk about the countertops. I don't know what type of countertops. The granite or marble or any pure stone, you could kasha. But I wrote on a list because I went to people's houses. They have, it's called granite composite, right? Your construction, right? Chabad, it is not pure granite. It's plastic mixed into it. It looks much more nicer. You cannot kasher that because it has I saw one of the wealthy people have a bin, and he was so disappointed when I told him he wanted to. It's much nicer, but it's stones together with plastic. It comes out much fancier, but you cannot kasher it because it's mixed with plastic. So it's pure granite, pure marble. I've seen all different types of stones. You name it. All those stones you get kasher. I'll get to you in a minute how. But anything that's plastic and ceramic, porcelain, enamel, Korean, all these things you cannot kasher. Has to be covered. You have to cover it. Now, granite, how to kasher the thing is again. The first question is, how do we use the counters during the year? Many mothers, many will not allow to put the challah onto the counter. I gave a sheet 2 years ago in my neighborhood. I gave it right before Pesach for the ladies. So I spoke this out. It depends. You put the challah on the counter, you don't. So this lady says to her, I never put it. Her daughter sits next to her. Mom, when I bake challahs, I put the challah onto the counter. And the mother was trying to convince that, she never puts it. Now you don't have to have it. It's very easy to kasher. So since then, I'd say if you have teenage daughters, forget it. If they're involved in the kitchen, forget it. It means if you put the challah onto the counter, then you really need to use a stone to kasher. And Chabad, someone told me have a pattern. They use an iron. That you must use an iron with the hot water. That means I have a stone. What you do is you get a brick stone. You heat it very, very much on the fire. Brick absorb enormous amount of heat. That you let it a long time. And then just put it on the counter and you pour the hot water as you move around. When you're pouring, it has to be poured all over. You can't give it just a pour. It's a long, hard job. You have to pour all over. So it's a big job. Period.
But the iron on the counter, it works very good.
Yeah, I have people.
Most of the time you feel the water bubbling.
Yeah. But you have to pour all over. You can't just. You give it a pour.
The water that you're pouring is also boiling water. Right?
Yes.
The moment you take it off the fire, it stops boiling.
You keep the iron plugged in, Rabbi?
No, you don't. I never tried that. Yeah, it's from here. Right before you put it on, but right before you feel the water.
No, it's hot.
You have a few. You don't do the whole thing. You do it piece by
Piece.
Why is the iron better? Because it's hot. It's like the same as the brick.
The Gemara, the Shiurim says, based on Yerushalmi, that the problem is when you pour water, it cools off. Pouring hot water cools off. So what happens is, since it cools off, but if when it hits the table and you have the iron, it doesn't let it cool off. That's the trick. That's what it says, Shiurim. Because we want to kasher the countertop by putting hot challah. Your wife bakes challah, she doesn't put the challah onto the countertop? Whatever it was, you don't even know.
Well, usually not.
Yeah, porcelain.
I mean, whatever. My son's
Well, my mother has like a tray she puts it on.
You're only talking about hot challah after it comes out of the oven.
After,
What about the dough on the...
That's not a problem. But the hot challah coming out of the oven, that is always the problem. And in my own house, I also see that. My wife, but my daughter, young people in generation have no problem. They just slide it onto the... That's what they do. So I'm saying, but if that's the case, you really need a real kashering on the counter. So you can't just pour hot water. If you never do that, our people are very neat and they will never want to do that. So they could just pour hot water, be good enough.
There's a granite counter like cleaning service where they steam
Yeah, but that does not help.
It qualifies as kosher.
That's wrong. It does not help.
Does it?
No. They advertise it and it's wrong.
Yeah, they do it.
Yeah, because it has to, the Moshe has the tshuva is masupik, since it's only steam, it's not water itself, it doesn't, he says maybe it doesn't kasher. They claim that it cleans the counter very, very well. And women, I heard this from women, that say it cleans the counter. I have a lady.
That's how they clean it. With these
Yeah,
steam cleaning.
that's the clean. But it doesn't, and in Halacha, the Hashgacha business, though, you could never say mich when they want to kasher things on that itself. Now, the other thing that you have to make sure, the hood over the oven, that has to be cleaned very well. That has to be cleaned. The hood, for some reason, accumulates a lot of dust and dirt, and that has to be cleaned very well.
No direct food touches it.
Well, it could drip in. You know, it accumulates, and it could drip into the food. In Pesach.
You're saying when you say clean it well, make sure there's no mamashes.
There's no mamashes. That's all you do after a long time. A dishwasher cannot be kashed. Oh, no, there's even, but no, you cannot kasher dishwasher. What? Doesn't make a difference. You cannot kasher dishwasher.
Caesar stone, is that the same as?
Caesar stone is what is Caesar stone?
It's also glue and cords together.
It's together. He says it's not pure stone. He's a contractor. He says it's not pure stone.
But you have to know what
Kind
else
of
is put in
in
there.
Yeah, so they put plastic in it, no?
You gotta cover it.
So you have to cover it.
So if you're gonna cover it, you still have to do this.
You really don't. You just have to clean it off well. If you don't, if you're going to cover it, the Shulchan Aruch says just clean it off very well and cover it. So, you could get it. It's very inexpensive to have it made, custom made. Covers. It's very nice. We have it done. We have it over 10 years. It's very inexpensive. Custom made. It's like you get this thick plastics, very thick plastic.
No benefit to steam cleaning it and then covering it. You might as well
No,
just
just cover it.
For Hilchos Pesach, if a woman wants the steam clean, it's what they hate.
Yeah, but he's saying if you cover it anyways, don't get benefit from steam clean if you're going to cover it anyways. Now the sink, if it's metal, you could kasher it, and you don't need to blowtorch it. And if you're going to blowtorch it, you're going to ruin the sink. Then blowtorching doesn't help, because again, I heard from people blowtorch it and tell me that every 2-3 years they get a new sink because after blowtorching it. So I explain anything that is going to get ruined. So you just the best way is to use a stone. We have a metal sink, and we use a stone to pour or iron. The same idea. You pour hot water. Now the only thing that has to be covered is the seams. The metal goes over, and there's a seam over there which is very hard to clean. You would just cover that with silver foil, because you don't know if the dirt got out from between the seam. The same thing with granite. There's the people have, a guy showed me in his house. He ordered extra expensive, should be one piece. Right? It must be very expensive, a guy showed me. He ordered to be one piece because he didn't want to have a thing that's Pesach. But the backsplash, he couldn't do it. The backsplash, there's the backsplash, and there's a tiny seam that fits the back to the thing. So all you have to do is cover that seam.
So if you have a countertop with little stones, then every single seam is a problem.
Countertop with?
That have many little stones.
That's not stone, that's tiles. That's cheres, you cannot kasha. That's cheres. But people have stone, it's usually once you have a slab or two slabs. And
So it's called caulking so anywhere where that is.
yes, the best is to cover. But if it's a porcelain sink, and there's granite composite sink too, all different fancy sinks, all those sinks you cannot kasha.
So really, the only countertops that are okay is if it's a single slab, because anywhere there.
Well, you could cover it. I've seen people have there's a tiny thing, and they just put tape over it. I was with someone's house. I noticed he put the best thing to put is just a strip of silver foil right there, and over there. That's
I just got a text from my wife, we're not covering it, and the whole point of the Caesar stone is you only need to steam it. That's why the builders install it.
Caesar. I didn't hear Caesar stone is what?
My wife said that's the whole point. Like she looked into it, so you don't have to cover it, you can just
Steam it. Problem is, the problem is that it is made out. Caesar stone is made from what?
It's made of quartz.
Quartz, but it's glued.
It's glued.
Putting glue and
You have other composite things in it. That's the problem.
I'll give you my business. We change it to granite.
And this is wrong.
Bill, are you saying that the Silverstone is straight quartz and then it's connected at certain points?
No, it's
The whole
it's
thing.
big slabs.
It's a big slab of.
But he's saying,
No, it's a mixture.
Yeah, it's a mix, and then they press it and
Like press
heat
wood.
it. Yeah.
it's not pure, it's not pure.
Steaming wouldn't work in any event, though. If it was straight quartz without any plastic, it still can't steam it.
Right, steaming is not good.
Just rather, previous, I'm sorry, I'm not plugging it up.
And Moshe has a tshuva, and he says steaming is not good.
There must be some rabbis that say it's okay.
I know.
I remember this guy was advertising for several
Yes.
years in all the, like the Jewish, what do you call it? And it said,
Could have decided.
qualifies as.
Yeah, I don't know. In halacha, it doesn't make sense.
I don't remember it, but I gotta stop being blind. I seem to remember that maybe at the RCC on there or something like that, but I don't remember.
If you have a warming drawer,
Let's make that warming.
my neighborhood, everyone has a warming drawer. A warming drawer is like, a warming drawer is it's a drawer that's heated, and if you, let's say you prepare food, you could put it in and it stays very hot, the food.
Where's the drawer?
It's a drawer in the kitchen.
It's in the stove, it's on the.
No, it's not even on
They
the,
actually sell these
big ones,
pieces of
industrial.
furniture. that you
It's
can
a
put in your
furniture.
dining room that have these warming
Yes.
doors that come out. So put your Shabbos food in there and,
that's what it is.
it's warm.
So a warming drawer, you cannot kasha because you cannot bring the heat up to anything.
Break it.
Yeah.
Another substance in there.
What do you say?
Put something in there.
Can't. You have to have,
Microwave?
the microwave is like this. Really a microwave, it's difficult to kasha, but if you really want to kasha it, you have to test your microwave. See, my microwave at home never gets hot, the walls. But I read there are microwaves that the walls do get hot. So I saw Rabbi Heinemann, it says in one of his writings I saw, he says to test the microwave, if the walls gets hot, put a potato in it and let it cook the potato and then touch the walls right away. I tried in my microwave, the milk and flakers, the inside, it never gets hot. We don't have expensive one. If it doesn't get hot, you can kasher it, clean it out very well, put it in a bowl of water and let it steam out, but you gotta change the glass. Because we Ashkenazim hold glass cannot be kashered. The Svardim hold that glass you don't need to kasher. The extreme.
But if the walls get hot.
But if the walls get hot, you can't kasher it.
Is there a difference between plastic and metal?
It doesn't make a difference. If the walls get hot, you cannot kasher it.
Because you might ruin it.
Yeah, because how are you going to make the walls hot again? How are you going to do that?
Yeah, some of those microwaves are like microwave convection ovens.
No, but it has to get hot, really hot. You don't know how to get. So Shiurim says you have to make sure it gets over that heat. How are you going to make that sure?
Past the heat that it gets hot.
Not past,
It has to get down. It's very hard to figure out. Did it always get so hot? How do you know what you put in to get hot?
If the walls get hot, you put in something for 5 minutes, the walls get hot. So you put in something for 10 minutes.
We
the walls
don't, yeah, but we have to see, since we cannot measure it, Shiurim says you have to make it, especially the B'zalman Shimon. There was a famous basic in Crown Heights, and this was a famous machalikas 30 years ago. You know, milk, when you pasteurize milk, you never bring it to boiling point. It ruins the milk. So they bring it under pressure, they bring it to about 100 degrees, 110, I forgot the number. So the question was that when they milked from the non-Jewish farm, so they kashered the coils by putting in Kabbalah Kachpolta, the same heat, a drop more heat. He held it's gotta be 212. And the problem was that he pulled back because you couldn't have milk. Those days, you couldn't get milk otherwise.
Why can't you just wash it down with a rag or microwave?
A rag? The walls are belay. You gotta make sure the walls get clean.
Right, but they could be clean if you put like a cleaner.
If it gets hot, the walls, how are you gonna make the hot walls? How do you know the walls got hot? It's not like an oven, the walls are gonna get very, very hot. I have no idea. I don't know what. Maybe your wife put in a potato, got very hot, and maybe now you're going to put in a smaller potato last week, and it's not so hot. I don't know how you could figure that out. That it gets the same heat. If you could
avoid it?
avoid it. I always tell people it's worth it. The microwaves is not so. I bought, and the Chag season, $35 a microwave because I want to be chef too, bilchli and fleshing. And my wife says you bought such a cheap one, and it's 7 years, it's still going strong. $35.
Hypothetically, you could put it in a
But you don't know during the year.
Microwave safe with thermometer, you put it in, you find the height.
But you don't
of the
know.
wall.
Yeah, I have no idea during the year how hot the walls got.
The walls are only going to heat up based on the heat inside.
But I don't know how hot it got because maybe you put in a potato, maybe you I put in a soup, or maybe it was a bigger soup.
Every microwave has a potential high.
I don't. But do you know the heat number?
The manual.
Doesn't work that way.
Don't absorb the energy. That's why they don't get hot.
Yes, they. Okay. So if you have a high chair, you have to cover the tray. Just clean it off, and you must cover the tray.
The kids can rip it off in the day.
No, it sticks.
No, you get this contact paper. But the grandchildren come, and it lasts from year to year. You put the heavy contact, they can't rip that off.
Could you theoretically paint over the counter or paint over?
It has to be thick as an etzbach, chutzi etzbach.
But not counterfeit.
No, that counterfeit is a separate thing, but if it becomes bottle, it has to be much thicker. So the high chair you should just cover if you have a baby. And now, the question everyone asks about the baby toys. Yes, most of you have young children, right? You still have young children. How old is the youngest?
My wife threw all the things to the closet.
At the closet. So no, I tell people to take a bunch of toys, decide what you want, wash it, clean it, and that would be for Pesach. Take whatever toys you want for the children. That's where the grandchildren come. Wife takes a bunch of toys. These are the grandchildren going to be. Cleans it out, soaks it in the bathtub, and that's the thing they're going to use, and it shouldn't be a problem. You know what I mean? That's just, you know what I mean. And
The baby bottle which was never used for chametz.
baby bottle, you have to change. Why means not? How do you know it was not used for chametz?
There's only one piece of, only one thing that goes in there.
He has one baby in the Bible.
Yeah, but how do you know it was not washed in the chametz place? How do you know that? So that's a problem. That's an. Wait a minute, you wash it with hot water. You don't wash the bottles, I see. I see. Of course. I think you ask your wife, you go home and you say, you want to wash the bottles tonight, and she'll tell you how to do it. No. But we don't know how. So that's a Pesach Machme Keli Sheni.
Is dishwasher hot enough? The heat from like a dishwasher?
Yeah, but the dishwasher, it's hot to kasher for other reasons.
I'm saying, can I kosher them inside the
No.
in the dishwasher?
You bottle, you can't kasher. Oh, the toys for sure you could do that. Toys you
So
can.
it takes in the plastic toys, put it in the dishwasher.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the bottle for baby bottle. Get a new baby bottle and a new, whatever it's called, motzets. How do you call that? Pacifier. Yes, you get that a new one. Because it's chametz. The baby sucked on with chametz all year round, and how do you know it didn't wash it in hot water? It's rubber. Oh. It was not washed in the chametz place. That's the problem. It's rubber. That's the problem about Pesach. It's rubber. We worried maybe you. But it's rubber doesn't came in a kasha. Yeah. Nochem, this is the cheapest expense you can have in Pesach. Yeah, but you cannot kasha rubber. It's made out of rubber. It's made out of plastic. Whatever it's thick.
Did it ever fall on the ground ever once?
Baby chair, you said you can clean baby chair or no?
Yeah, clean it. First, wash it and cover it. You have to. Now, the other things I tell people is your wife, if she, I have a bunch of daughters, and one year I asked them how they wash dishes, with the rings on, without the rings on. So if you wash dishes with the rings on, you have to kasher the rings. So, but if you have a maid, a shiksa comes to help Yantiv, you have to tell her to take off the jewelry and wash her hands when she comes in. You have to tell the shiksa that.
What about all the...
We have, I know that I'm rich, but we have a shiksa. It's too much for my wife with all the children coming, grandchildren. So she comes in, she has to wash her hands, she takes off the jewelry, and she wears a big, how you say, shirt, apron. I don't let her do with the chametz digger thing. She wears a huge apron.
What about the urim in the pockets and stuff?
That's okay. You have to check the package just for chometz, not for purim.
No, for the shiksa.
Shiksa, you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry. Now, towels and tablecloths could be kasher just by cooking, by washing, going through a wash. So tablecloths, towels, you don't have to get Pesach to get towels, Pesach a dishcloth. All you do is let it go through the hot cycle and it gets cleaned and kasher.
What if you see a stain of a piece of food after you wash the towel?
Can't use things.
Stain, once it's washed, it came out. Whatever it's.
White towel, the wipes and come in.
Yeah, but that stain is not mamoshes. It's just a stain of discoloration. It's not chametz. Now the fridge and the refrigerator, again, most people do not put hot food into the fridge.
Yeah, but kavisha for 24 hours in water.
Yeah, that's very
If it's wet, if it's damp or something and it's sitting in that.
very rare. That you don't have to worry about. But you do have to wash it out, and if you want to be machmir, pour hot water onto the trays. You know, yeah, clean it. You have to clean it. You do have to clean it. But if you want to be what?
You don't have to cover anything?
You don't have to cover anything.
A lot of those silver oil happy on that refrigerator.
They cover it because of this 24 hours.
Yeah, but those are nothing. I watched for years now. No, usually, rarely it spills, and usually that if you pour a kuvish helps pouring hot water, and
Just eat it when you
yeah.
My toothpaste mouthwash.
Well, let me get to that. The only thing you have to check on the list, but there's a big list to make for Pesach. Now I'm going to tell you something. The list is the yeah.
Okay, I just want to ask about the refrigerator. If some people have some take the hot like chicken soup in the pot and put it in the fridge. So if you do that, then the fridge is plastic. And
Well, people they put in hot.
yeah, it ruins the fridge. It's not
It ruins.
when the soup, the pot is hot. It's still at least very, very warm.
Hayat saladis boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you put in yat saladis boy, then you worry. Then you're about to be machma. But then you just what do you have? You have plastic in the fridge or glass? We have glass.
Plastic.
So then if you put in hot soup into it, then it's kedai to cover it. Because
It's not a big deal. They have these things.
yeah, I'm just saying then it's kedai to cover it. My wife never puts the hot soup into the fridge. Never. Even the children don't do it. But I heard this.
The hot soup, you put it in a plastic container, and then you put it in, it's still boiling hot. Those Ziploc
The
containers.
Ziploc are sealed well. Very rare. There's we don't have a light bulb because it's Shabbos.
You take it out of the Shabbos.
Yeah, and if you forget,
Every Shabbos take it out.
and Nuchem, Rabbi zal dich helfen, Rabbi zal dich helfen and benchen. But the day Shabbos you're going to forget, you're going to get a mishaberach from your wife.
No, but the truth is, there is shmutz on the light bulb. I'm not even joking. There's always a little bit of.
Yeah, we didn't have a light bulb, period, because of Shabbos Yanta.
So take it out.
Wash it, clean it, just clean it. But I just want to say what he said, Binyamin said, if you do put hot soup into the fridge, then you have a problem. Then that means that could possibly spill and you have to worry that again, and so that's a problem. Okay? Now, the only thing, let me just tell you about the lists. The list is very, very annoying because I've been called already 3 weeks ago, a woman asking me about certain medicines that are never on the list. Any medication that a person takes is allowed to take Pesach. You have to check the list because it's. Let me explain this. During the year, on a Vela, if anyone learns Daf Yomi, you just literally had it a few days ago. The Gemara says that the Vela, if it's nifsel machilis odom, it's not called nevela. Once a piece of meat is unedible for human consumption, the Issa Nevela flies off it. Now, if you want to eat it, even though it's disgusting, it's Medrabanim on Yasa. That's called Arsheveh. Pesach, we need to be Nifsa Machilis Kelev, that a dog wouldn't eat it. Now, I many years ago, asked people who own dogs, and I asked them, anyone who grew up with the dogs over here? I asked them, how do you feed a dog? How do you get medicine for the dog? It's impossible. You have to trick the dog. Because, what? Wrap in cheese and peanut butter, otherwise, and even then he spits it out, right? Even now. So, so, I'm trying the pill is nifsa machilis kelev. So even in what the problem of the pills is, they put a binder into the pill. A pill to make it hold. They put a binder. So very often the cheapest thing is always to use cornstarch. But sometimes, which is kidneys, is surely not a problem. But sometimes it doesn't work with the chemicals, so they put in wheat binders, whatever it is. But it's a dog will not eat it. It's unedible.
Is that with the vitamins also?
The same thing, vitamins. That's why it's absolutely not a problem. The only problem is liquid medication that have a taste. Someone Metamucil it's called. Someone showed me Metamucil that has a taste. Even all year told me Pepto-Bismol. All these things that you have to check. All that things have to be checked on the list. Make sure it's kosher because that. But anything that's a pill form is not a problem. Now, all your wife's makeup, the only thing you have to check, you don't have to check the mascara, you don't have to check all the other things because a dog will never eat it. The only thing you have to check is the lipstick, because that's a chumar, it says in Shulchan Aruch, the lipstick. You have to check the mouthwash and the toothpaste. And you don't have to get, toothpaste that tastes disgusting and it was toivel in some other mikveh. All you got to do, I have to get regular crest. You look at the list, and it's not a problem with chametz. They check it out, and there's no chametz in it. What do you say?
A dog would not eat toothpaste.
But it comes into your mouth. Perfumes is a huge. Most perfumes are cheap, and they would not put into perfumes alcohol, weed alcohol. It's very expensive. Once in a while, the very expensive perfumes, the real expensive, they would do. And the reason, Me'ikar Halacha is also nifsa mechilas kelev. But what happened was, in Moshe, Feinstein held that during World War II, the drunk learned how to get the alcohol out of perfumes. So Mamela, he held that that's the reason you should be machmir. So when I sell the chumetz, I always tell people, put away the perfumes and sell the perfumes. And if your wife wants perfume, let her check the list and buy Pesach perfume. Yes.
But the pills, you said pills not an issue. So for year round, it's like a gelatin.
It's not a problem.
Like gelatin.
Chazer tray gelatin is not a problem.
So a gel cap with
It's not a problem.
Maybe like fish oil or whatever.
The problem is the oil, not the cap. You have to make sure it's kosher oil because it's like you're digesting food in a cap.
You said it's not in the
The
bag.
cap. Let's say you take a food and you wrap it in a plastic and you swallow it. The food inside the plastic is regular food. See, the fish oil is wrapped in a gelatin capsule. Inside the gelatin capsule, you puncture, regular oil comes out. Make sure that it's kosher oil.
But what if that inside is not edible or edible for a dog?
It is edible.
I'm saying not fish oil.
Oil is edible.
I'm saying other pills,
Yeah, then it's not a problem.
just a medicine or
So that's what I'm saying. That's not a problem. The only problem is the fish oil. You have to make sure it's kosher.
so anything solid you're for sure safe.
No problem.
Why are people not from vitamins, not medicines? All you do, I mean, sure, the whole piece.
The nice tasting one.
It's not medicines.
Is
all you
wrong.
very strong against
Maybe you say vitamins are not medicine.
So what? I mean,
the,
Mamonov,
supplements, not medicine.
doesn't make a difference. In Halacha, it's nifsa mechilas kelev. You don't say achshvei. There's a sefer called Nitte Gavriel. So, and I looked, he's malakid everyone. He likes to find every chumen in the book. So I tried to find in the sefer, who is machmer leketchel. He couldn't find anyone. And the bottom he says, I looked all over someone to machmer. I found someone is machmer. In yeshiva we called it, there's a certain expression, there's a certain form called Yikam Pirka Mishamayich and Vechizda Rachmazai. We have no idea who they wrote it. A bunch of names. Just today, anyone can print anything. That means nothing. It's one of these svarim that no one ever heard about, and he wants to say L'ketchila should be machmer. Hello, but the Chazanish, Reb Chaim Oizer, and Chaim Nua, all the Gedolim last generations all said, you don't say achshvei on a pill. Again, something nifsa mechilas kelev. If you decide to eat it, with the rabbanim, it's also if you're eating it. But here, you're not eating it. You're swallowing it whole. You're not interested in eating it. Achshvei. Achshvei in Hebrew means, who can translate it?
You are giving it credence.
You give it credence, importance. Achshave, Lushan Achshava. Achshave. First of all, Rav the Shoilem don't hold Achshave. It's only the Rosh that holds Achshave. And even according to the Rosh, it's when you eat it, but not if you want to take it in a pill form. It's very frustrating because many people think that the list has to, and I spoke to an expert that even in the list, they think it has to be in the list. I spoke to a lady who used to work in a pharmaceutical company, these big companies, explained to me the same medicine could be made in a few places in the world. They use different ingredients.
You really never know.
You never know. Even if it says the one, that could be the one that's done here. The one that's done in another place, they might use different. Because they use the cheapest ones. She was not allowed to tell me this secret, but that's what they do.
Just to give a sticker.
Just for the stickers. That part they use the cheapest. The binder.
I'm sorry to go back to the dishwasher. Can someone be Mako and use the dish? Because
Oh.
Maybe during the year, maybe someone told them that they can make things like not
No, I saw a trooper, Moshe said you just change the racks.
From milchiks to fleishiks.
during the year.
No kosher
But
We Ashkenazim don't kasher glass. The Sfardim hold that glass is not belay. You're allowed to, right? I have a Sfardim who is close to me, and he got married, and he tells me, when he bought everything glass, he says, we use a milchis fleishiks Pesach.
What do you think the custom, Rabbi? What do you think is custom for so many women? They used to kosher glass.
That was in Europe. It says in Elchonon they couldn't afford it, so the drinking glasses they would soak for 3 days. But that because they couldn't afford it. It says clearly, if you could afford it, you shouldn't use glass. It says before in Elchonon.
That's for Ashkenazim.
Ashkenazim. Sfardim hold you don't have to kasher glass.
during the year we could be Mako from
During the year you're Paiskim Ameku. But we chometz we're very machmer.
But even Ashkenazim was a during the year.
Yes, during the year the mini was to be used. Yes, that's true. But that's the halacha. The only thing is glass. But the Sfardim also, if it's glazed, it is baleya. China is baleya, even according to the Sfardim. Because since it's just glazed, it doesn't have Shem glass. It's
Yeah, but it's only the glaze.
yeah, cheres, but it's glazed, it still
If
doesn't.
an Ashkenaz goes to a Sephardi's house,
A lady literally asked me this question. She is an Ashkenaz. Her sister married a Persian who's a from, became a Baal Tshuva, and they use glass. He was taught by the Persians use glass, and he says, I'm going to the Seder, what should I do? They said, tell your sister to serve you on paper, in plastic.
But she has to spend the money for that.
I knew, Rabbi Tom, sorry, I missed it. You said it's glazed, it is glass?
China, you have China? You saw China?
Not real.
Well, China is glazed.
Okay.
You know what it means? They put a thin strip of glass onto it. That is called not glass. Even according to Sfardim, it's baleya. Even though it's glazed, we say it's baleya.
And for the year, it's not in Toronto, for the year.
Today you can use v'mochis and fleishiks. We hold it's cheres and it's baleya.
And the kosher
No. Anything else?
Quickly back to the microwave. As long as the walls don't heat up, then it's okay.
Change the glass. You have to change the glass.
How do you put them in the glass?
Take a potato, put it in, and let it really bake, and check quickly the walls if it gets heated up. I checked in my microwave; it doesn't get hot at all, ever. The inside. Yeah. Take a potato. That's the best way. A potato generates a lot of heat.
So how do you know if there's enough heat to say
You touch the walls. By me, the walls were cold. Period. But I read that some of the microwaves that doesn't stay cold.
You spend $35. You spend $100 to become hot.
So, someone's mocking peeling everything, Pesach, yeah? Oh,
So,
you're gonna add something?
no, I'm going to explain that. Every year people ask me this question. So the reason why people peel fruit is because we're worried that maybe chometz came onto it, and chometz is b'mashu. But chometz b'mashu is only on Pesach. So I tell people, if you buy fruit before Pesach, you wash it off very well. You don't have to peel it. The reason the peeling comes from was because on Pesach is mamashi. So you buy fruit on Pesach, how do you know the guy, maybe the chometz got splashed on there. Who knows what got there? But before Pesach, if you wash it off very, very well, and there's the chometz mamashu before Pesach becomes bottle. So let me explain something. Every matzah has chometz to it. Do you know that? It's a secret that we don't want to tell anyone. But the truth is, when you have flour, there's no way, the Shulchan Aruch explains it, Barichas, there's no way that flour in a piece of matzah, the matzah doesn't have some chometz. Though before Pesach becomes bottle, lach balach, and we don't say choyze v'ner, we don't say it wakens up it again. That means since it was baked, the matzah, it's perfectly okay. On Pesach, if we bake matzahs, that's a problem. That's why we have a minig on bake matzahs on Pesach, because we're afraid that, on Pesach it's a mashi will become asa. So the fruit you're worried about, maybe there's a mashi chometz. If you wash it off very well before Pesach, it shouldn't be a problem.
So people are not going to not to have manufactured stuff. It's home for a it's a home to have manufactured.
I don't know. The truth is, I cannot answer that because you eat matzahs. Matzah is manufactured.
Right. Well, people find that I have no choice. I'm going to have minimal manufactured stuff. Like that.
I cannot answer. Then let me explain the makor of the minig. The minig was why they didn't have manufactured stuff because you couldn't control. No one knew what it was doing on in the factories. How do you know that someone was not eating chometz while they were doing it? But if you have the OKP or OUP, or you have the other ashgachas where they made a run and they made sure that it's kosher lepesa, they made sure that's better than the matzahs. Did you hear what I just said? Listen carefully. A manufactured thing was the problem. We didn't know what they did. Today, they are paranoid if any dirt comes into the thing. Well, it depends what they did. In Jews, they were worried that maybe there was chometz into the liquid over there. We're not so clean in Europe. Today, imagine Tropicana, you find dirt. I always say over the story that they used to make tuna fish over here. So the mashgiach used to work. So I used to be in the kotel over here. He would bring boxes and boxes of tuna for free. Why? Because the tuna labels did not come out 100% the label's good. They refused to sell it. And he had to promise he's going to give it to poor people, and not in the shelves in the store. That means they would rather throw it into the ocean than sell it because it doesn't look good for them. And, imagine Tropicana how you find breadcrumbs in the juice. So that's why OK gives a shkoch on Tropicana juice. They have a run special for Pesach. I once read.
Sure. So what are you saying? It's okay to eat processed food?
Everyone has the minig. I'm explaining what the source of processed food came from. Processed food was in Europe. They didn't buy sugar. All these things you couldn't eat. All these things they didn't know, how it was done. Who was watching?
In general, anything that's not made in your own kitchen under your own auspices, right, has a greater chance of something happening theoretically that you have if you're.
Well, I'm not convinced about that because the companies, they're more paranoid in your kitchen.
Before Pesach, many of the women, they buy these big boxes of oranges. You're not cleaning all the oranges before Pesach. So
orange is not a problem. What's the problem? Orange is not a problem. But if you buy apples.
On Pesach,
because you're saying that what?
It's chometz b'mashu. If I bought it before Pesach, a big thing, but I didn't clean each one. If I take one out on Pesach and I want to make orange juice, does it have a rule already from because it was bought before Pesach?
No, it has to be cleaned. No, he wants to squeeze it. I will tell you the truth is, I buy Tropicana OKP juice, period. That's what I do. It's what?
So that means milk. Some people are machmir that any milk or something.
Everyone is machmir. That says in Shulchan Aruch. We don't buy milk that's milk on Pesach. You can't buy kosher milk on Pesach that's milk on Pesach. Yeah, everyone drinks milk before Pesach.
If you buy the milk before Pesach, before Pesach. My father doesn't eat any milk on Pesach.
Why? Let me tell you where the minig comes from. No. Milk was a whole different thing. The problem with milk was, in Europe, once upon a time, there was no fridge. You know that. Once upon a time. And so it was, they needed milk. Milk that was milk from a cow that ate chometz on Pesach is also. So the only milk they could use, that was milk before Pesach. So Mamela, that's why they, in Europe, they didn't. But today, you put the milk in the refrigerator. It was milk before. You can't buy the kosher milk. Only milk that you're going to buy now, even the on Chalamoid, is going to be milk that's been milk before Pesach. No milk. Just listen to me. The milk that you buy here, are you in Eretz Yisrael or you're here? You're here. The milk you buy in the store here is milk before Pesach. The store just has a big fridge to store it. That's all what it is.
And eggs is the same thing, right?
The eggs, same thing. They didn't buy eggs on Pesach is because they were worried about the eggs was fed the chicken's chometz, and that's how you have eggs. So that's why you buy before Pesach the eggs. That's it.
So you can't buy, you should not buy eggs during the.
That's the minig, not to buy eggs chalamoid, because maybe the eggs, the chickens were fed chometz. That's an important minig. That's not a minig. That's halacha. That's not just a minig.
But can we trust that if we go to a store that's
A kosher store,
kosher store,
I hope so.
under supervision?
If it has supervision,
All the stores of RCC have.
On the eggs?
No, on the store.
that's what that means nothing.
They don't get a delivery on Colombo.
Yeah,
They have it.
I don't know. I don't know the story is here, but the best thing you should do, find out, call the RCC. We buy the eggs before Pesach, and that's the minig was. And buy 30 dozen eggs.
Go to Costco, buy the store out, you're
What do
good.
they do with some access stores? What do they do with the milk?
I don't know what they're doing. That's some. I really don't. I have no idea. Because there are people who ask me, they have pets. And I have a guy in my neighborhood who sells a chometz. He has a lumber yard. And the best guard for his lumber yard is a Rottweiler. And because that's, they don't climb over the fence if they meet him. You know, that's the best. So he has to give it food. 2 years ago, he was not well, and the veterinary told him to give him chometz. He had to sell the dog to the guy and the food to the guy. All geschäft, how to do it. So I don't know why they did in Europe. It was a big problem with the farmers had in Europe. That's one of the reasons Jews don't want to have farm here, because it's a huge problem. How about to do Pesach? Any other question?
Can't you sell the whole farm to, a guy and
You're not supposed to sell behemoths to a guy, so it's a very big problem. It's a separate halacha.
The oranges, why do they have to change anything? It's cultural place up year round. You mentioned they have to check it out before you.
They don't, they charge you another $2.
They don't. No.
No? Why did anything have to happen at all?
They just want to make sure that when they was doing it, there was some watching it was done
But if
They
it's
change
not
the
the
soap, they
position,
can wash the orange.
but if it's not the position.
before Pesach.
Levy told me, they use soap. Any orange in Tropicana is washed with soap before it's squeezed. It's squeezed and rinsed out. And before Pesach, they use a different soap.
Okay? There's the answer.
To make little kidney. And they don't charge.
I'm curious, as far as when I was in yeshiva at Crown Heights, they were very reluctant about non-kosher microwaves. Where does that come from?
It's very difficult to kasher microwave. That's why we didn't kasher.
Glass, how do you cook the glass? I don't even know how to take the glass out.
Oh, the glass you could take out. The problem is, see, the big problem is, a lady just called me a few weeks ago, the shiksa. I want to tell you a story. A lady calls me up a few weeks ago, the shiksa cooked in the microwave her food. She caught her doing it. So she asked me what to do. I says, you got it. The microwave is not a problem, the glass is a problem. She calls me back, is there any way to kasher glass? Because she went to the store, you can't, the glass calls, she has to call the company, they're charging $30. You know what I mean? She couldn't get it in the store, so she got on the internet, and they charging her $30 plus shipment for a glass. So,
When you say the glass, you just mean the glass tray. What about the
try
glass
it.
window?
But that's not a problem. It doesn't get hot. It doesn't get hot. Try it out. You have a microwave at home? Try it out tomorrow. Take a potato. It's very simple. Just put it in a plate, let it get well cooked, and touch the walls. Now, I was read that some of the better microwaves don't get hot. Does get hot. That's why they're doing.
I thought you said there's no absorption in glass, so what?
According to the Svardim, we Ashkenazim say it does absorb.
We just.
But it doesn't have like a certain time period you can wait, and it's okay, or, you know?
And yes,
If we do a simple scientific test to find out the truth about the glass, can we just abolish all these monogamous?
no,
Why not?
because
So basically, we
No, we don't. That doesn't. Because if the Shiurim says that it's absorbs, we don't care what scientists say. That's the meaning in Klal Yisrael. Well, garlic, what you just said, there's many people don't eat garlic. Many people don't know where it comes from. They used to dry garlic with chametz. So beer. So if you buy kosher pesach garlic from these big companies, it's delish. Where they, from the beginning to end, process it. It's no problem to have garlic.
People don't use raw garlic for that reason, or if you grow your own.
If you grow your own, there are people. My brother-in-law has a hobby. One of my brother-in-laws who grows his own garlic. I'm just saying, but you buy garlic with hashgacha is b'chlal not a problem. That's clearly in Shulchan how the problem is they bought it for loose garlic from them.
But fresh garlic, people don't use fresh garlic.
Because because the way they dry the garlic, the fresh is also dried.
But not everyone's sick. You can all buy fresh garlic from them.
But still, that holds that we don't eat garlic, right?
You don't need garlic, but if you that's bitar hashgacha because there was no hashgacha. But if you make sure it has an hashgacha,
Mentioned in my colleagues,